Tim, tell us what's happening with what we used to be known as Fall TV Week, what it is this year, moving to virtual, what you hope to present, some of the themes in the upcoming sessions.
Yeah, nothing particularly special in the fact that it's converting to virtual, right? But the good news is that we've got very intensive tracks over the course of the month that kind of layer into some very specific areas of importance. Two of which that I'm been excited to help program. One is called Audience Measurement. The other one is called Streaming TV Summit. And I can't think of two areas more interesting and challenged by even the last 6 months of COVID-inspired changes to viewing behavior than those two. And we've got a wonderful lineup of folks, hopefully a few that are unique and not so obvious in both of those areas. I'll give you a couple of examples. I mean, at Audience Measurement, we're going to have a very candid chat with Bill Levick, the CEO of ComScore, where we're going to kind of talk about all the various challenges that are going on to how to keep up with the just frenzied change of how people are watching or consuming what I like to call the medium formerly known as TV, right? Streaming and on-demand and subscription-based and over-the-top and AVOD and fast channels and all that kind of stuff. And ComScore is squarely in the midst of all that. And frankly, as a challenger brand to the legacy sample-based methodologies that arguably are not nearly capable of keeping up with consumer behaviors. On the streaming TV front, we've got some very great candid chats. For example, we're going to have a one-on-one, or really a two-on-one conversation with the two major founders of the two leading ad-supported streaming services, that being Tom Ryan of Pluto TV and Farhad Masoudi from Tubi. These guys have been at the very beginnings of what 4 or 5 years ago was, you couldn't get arrested getting meetings to talk about streaming programming and ad-supported at that. And we're going to have an intimate chat with both of them simultaneously to kind of hear how they went through it all and where they're both individually poised to go in the future with their new corporate owners in Viacom and Fox, respectively. So some really good conversations. We've got a great conversation with Mark DeBevois from the newly named Paramount Plus entity within Viacom. So that's what is happening with CBS All Access and CBS News Network and CBS Sports HQ and all the various streaming activities that CBS and Viacom have done now, inclusive of Pluto. So we've got a great one-on-one conversation with him as they now retool and reorient that into a new Uber brand known as Paramount Plus. So lots of great conversations and panels and all that kind of stuff. And it's a whole week's worth of stuff times two. And we're looking forward to having it and hopefully educating and informing and maybe entertaining a little bit along the way.
Tim, so the programs sort of focus on one major issue, on a big issue in our reporting, which is that measurement and analytics. It's needed, but it's not really there in the streaming in OTT. And Bill Levick is working on things, and the verification companies are working on things. But it seems to me that that's kind of a big step in terms of the industry maturing and what's needed. Where do things stand, in your opinion, in terms of proper measurement around CTV and streaming services, and where that should be going?
Look, I think there is a group of legacy players that are effectively the engines of television measurement as it's historically been done. Clearly, that's the Nielsen's and the ComScores and the Kantars and, in Europe, the GfKs of the world. These are all entities that, for lots of different reasons, have been able to be some of the strongest and loudest voices in how television and video measurement can and should look, and the valuations and the currencies around all of that stuff. That said, those are also companies that are individually challenged by different issues, whether it's Nielsen splitting into two or ComScore still trying to come out of their accounting issues, and then the private equity entities that own some of the others or heavily invested in such. And all the while, a very exciting group, at least two, maybe sometimes 3 dozen firms in the realm of startups that are all innovating on a bunch of different levels about what data and measurement and analytics and attribution and all those kinds of things that can be brought to the mix that either on their own or could get aggregated amongst themselves or could actually be partners to some of these big traditional firms. And there's just a litany of them. And these are things like ACR, automatic content recognition, things like attribution measurement, things like being able to truly, whether it's in streaming, a fast channel environment or AVOD, there's just so much going on in terms of all of that. And I think you need to think about how that gets shaken up visibly and viscerally and see what comes out the other end. I think it's pretty safe to say that the legacy players of audience measurement are going to be quite transformed by all the innovation that's happening at the edges from the venture-backed space, for sure.
Great. And Tim, finally, some thoughts about transforming your event programming that you've done, that so many of us have done physically, to this virtual environment. Give us some of your thoughts about how it's been going. TV 2020, kind of maybe some, it's not over, it's halfway over, but some thoughts about going virtual.
This is not unique in terms of going to a virtual format. I think we all have to be very cognizant of the fact that everybody is tired of staring at their screens for hours on end. And, I think the only way I can really sort of, besides the content and having some unique and different speakers as part of the mix, is to just kind of take a deep breath and recognize everybody's time is not only valuable, but could also use a bit of a breather and try to be a little bit more, I would say informal and a little bit more conversational and frankly, a little bit more inclusive in all senses of the word about sort of the collective craziness that we're all going through, right? So I think it's really hard to try to take all this great content and try to manifest it as we normally would have in an individual and in-person kind of environment. But I think the idea is to keep it somewhat sort of fresh and conversational. I think that's our best shot to sort of keep this relevant and helpful to lots of folks out there. Lord knows we need less screen by screen conversations and more in-person. We're going to do our best, obviously, to keep what would have been an in-person kind of environment as intimate as possible. And, again, if we keep it as informally oriented as possible, but educational at that, hopefully we'll have done our job and then some. I will say this, we are flabbergasted by how many people have registered for the course of this month's conference stuff, including these two that we're producing next week. At last check, we've got over 1,500 registrants. Now, who knows how many will sort of appear for all of our conversations next week. But even in a conservative kind of environment, that's at least a few hundred folks. That is probably 2 or 3 times as many that would have experienced this live and in person. So there's some great silver lining to all of that. If we can reach more people with hopefully some need to know information and maybe enjoyable at that, I think maybe we'll have done a pretty good job, and knock on wood.